And even if we look at the highest animal foods, we're seeing milk protein at 95%, we're seeing casein at 94.1%. We're talking about a few percent difference in digestibility. This is nothing to really worry about. It's an absolutely tiny difference that could easily be overcome by just consuming, a tiny bit more. It's really not an issue at all. Also, there is simply no good evidence that widespread protein deficiency in plant eaters in Western populations, and actually in some populations, vegans may consume even more protein per body weight than non-vegetarians because the vegans tend to weigh less. So the amount of protein they need for their body weight is less. And so that's sort of an interesting comparison there. And we also have randomized controlled trials where they'll take people, they'll split them in half get the plant protein like a rice or a soy or a pea protein, and then half get the typically whey protein, which is animal based, and they'll have them lift weights and they'll measure how much muscle they gain, how much strength they gain over the course of weeks or months, and it's about the same. We don't see any significant differences or strength or size between the two, and so that shows us that both the plant and animal foods or animal proteins, they're working just as well. Um, Now, some people will push back on that and say, well, if you're using protein supplements, they're because they're extracted and a lot of the fiber and everything has been removed, that it's not super accurate. Well, we actually have some, or it's not relevant rather to whole food sources or actual food source of protein. Well, we actually have some research looking at that. There was a trial published in 2021 by researchers out of Brazil where they had 19 vegans and 19 meat eaters. They had both of them up their protein intake to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're wondering what that would be for you, you take your weight in kilograms and you just times it by 1.6, and that will give you the number of grams per day here. Um, and for the vegans to do that, they added soy protein. For the meat eaters to do that, they added whey protein, and they resistance trained 2 times a week for 12 weeks. Now, one really important takeaway here is that yes, they added some protein supplementation, but in both groups, the majority of their protein came from foods. So if it is true that plant foods are inferior for protein or that it doesn't do much, well, then we should see the animal protein group do better. But we didn't. We saw similar outcomes after 12 weeks of resistance training between both the meat eaters and vegans. And so this really does suggest that there isn't a meaningful difference between them. They can both get the job done when it comes to strength gains and muscle gains. And in fact, the plant protein sources tend to be much healthier. And then finally, we have another trial that came out a little bit later in 2023. And this took 22 participants who were placed on either a plant-based diet or omnivorous diet. Um, and they aimed to consume 2 grams of protein per kilogram per day, which was actually a little bit higher than the other trial, but that was only because they wanted to make sure that if people fell short, that they still got enough. So it's a bit of a safety net. And for the plant protein group or the plant-based group, the primary source of protein was the mycoprotein. So I discussed that earlier, that sort of not exactly mushroom, but sort of mushroom derived protein. And they also supplemented everybody, both the meat eaters and the vegans, with creatine, which can help bolster performance. And they resistance trained 5 times a week for 10 weeks, so a much more rigorous resistance training program. And at the end of the day, both groups saw similar improvements in lean mass and performance. So again, showing that both the plant protein sources and the animal sources end up, providing about the same results. Now, obviously, we touched on soy a fair bit there, so I would be remiss if I didn't spend at least a couple slides, debunking some of the concerns around soy. And the biggest concern by far is that soy is estrogenic, that it's going to lead to um, breast growth in men, or tanking your testosterone, or whatever other concerns you've heard out there. But and while soy does contain what are called isoflavones, which are a type of phytoestrogen, they are not estrogen. They're different. They are called phytoestrogens because some structural characteristics of the phytoestrogens are similar to estrogen. So they can interact with estrogen receptors. However, they bind to those receptors with about 1/1000th the affinity of our own endogenous estrogens, the estrogens that we produce, so not as strongly. And they preferentially bind to certain types of receptors called estrogen receptor beta. which are concentrated in bone tissue, and that's a really good thing. We want more estrogen, uh, estrogenic kind of interactions with the bone tissue, as that helps to maintain bone mineral density. But those receptors may actually have anti-estrogenic effects in breast tissue, and that's also good. Too much estrogen in breast tissue can promote breast cancer, whereas anti-estrogenic effects would presumably do the opposite. And we actually see that soy consumption consistently decreases breast cancer risk in populations who are consuming soy regularly. So, if anything, we're seeing results in sort of opposite direction of what's typically claimed. And even women who are predisposed to breast cancer due to genetic variants or who have survived breast cancer appear to benefit from consumption. And this is actually recognized by the American Cancer Society and the Canadian Cancer Societies. And I'm sure others across the globe, but I haven't necessarily looked at every country's, being a Canadian myself. Um, but it is recognized by those bodies, and they do discuss the potential benefits there. And we have dozens of randomized controlled trials now consistently showing that soy does not alter estrogen or testosterone levels or cause breast growth in men. Now, where the controversy typically stems from are rodent studies where rodents will be fed or injected with very high doses of these phytoestrogens and might run into problems. But for one, we're not consuming them in isolation like that, and we aren't rodents, and the doses we consume are typically much, much less. And then there are a couple extreme case studies where people were consuming in the ballpark of, 14, 15, up to, 20 servings of soy a day and potentially running into some issues. And even then, it's not clear if soy was the problem or the fact that they had a diet that only consisted of basically one food and wasn't very well rounded, or perhaps other variables. But even if we say it was the soy, which isn't confirmed, it's obviously a very extreme case. Whereas like in clinical trials, we have data, at least in men, of going up to, 4 or 5 servings a day easily. In women, if we look at phytoestrogen studies or like the supplement studies, it goes even much higher than that. So I don't see any reason to be concerned at those levels of intake. Now, we also have an umbrella review of 114 meta-analyses and systematic reviews, so a massive, massive review of the literature, as well as a scoping review that came a little bit later. Um, and they found that higher soy intake was associated with a lower risk of developing ovarian cancer, gastric cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, dying of cardiovascular disease, at least for fermented soy in particular, um, cardiovascular disease, stroke, coronary heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. So we're seeing numerous benefits across the board with pretty large reductions in risk in some cases, with no clear sign of harm, really. We'll touch on one potential harm on the next slide, but not even related to soy per se. Then we also have from randomized controlled trials data suggesting that there are improvements in a number of cardiovascular markers like artery function, blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides, a little bit of weight loss, potentially improved cognitive function, and isoflavone or phytoestrogen supplements decreasing hot flash severity and frequency and reducing vaginal dryness in menopause. So, plenty of potential benefits. One thing I do want to caution against, though, is that these numbers for the various outcomes are based on varying levels of evidence. So, for some of these things like breast cancer, the evidence is pretty strong. For some of the other outcomes, the evidence is so-so at this point. It's suggestive of a benefit. We're not seeing harm, which is fantastic, but I wouldn't, write home necessarily that every single one of these is spot on as far as results because the data for some of the outcomes is a bit limited. But again, the take home is we are not seeing harm here. And if anything, we're seeing plenty of benefits. Now, that same umbrella review found one potential harm, and that was miso soup increased risk of gastric cancer, stomach cancer by 17%. However, if we go back here, we see that stomach cancer risk was reduced by 22%. So it's weird that soy appears to reduce stomach cancer risk, but miso soup may increase risk. And actually, what it likely is that miso soup is very high in sodium. Or salt, and salt can increase stomach cancer risk. So it's not even the soy necessarily, it's more likely the fact that there's just a lot of salt in there that's doing it. And then finally, soy safety has also been investigated in children, and soy milk is currently the only plant milk recommended for children after age 1 by the American Academy of Pediatrics and after age 2 by the Canadian Pediatric Society. The main reason for the CPS suggesting after 2 is that breastfeeding is recommended to continue for 2 years. So after that, once the milks are consumed. And soy formula is considered an acceptable alternative for full-term infants as well. And I believe this is my last slide on soy. Soy is also very nutritious. We see that an extra firm block of tofu, or rather half a block of tofu, provides quite a bit of protein, decent amount of calcium, uh, decent dose of iron as well, a bit of the omega-3s, a non-negligible amount, and some choline. It's one of the few plant foods that are relatively rich in choline. Soy milk also can be a good source of protein, calcium, especially if it's fortified, very good source of calcium, a little bit of iron, and then typically because of the fortification, B12 as well. And I just used a very common brand for these numbers. I believe it was a Silk brand I looked up, but they're all very similar as long as they're fortified. And then edamame as a whole soy food, also a very good option. A lot of protein there when it comes to beans and legumes, decent amount of iron, zinc, again, omega-3s, vitamin K, folate, and choline. And then tempeh is the final one here, also a great source of protein and other micronutrients.